Hello everyone on the internet and thanks for tuning in. I am RyuKiva of RyuKiva Toku.
And welcome to another episode of Toku Bros. I'm the Winter Cosplayer.
Honore Decado!
And as the tumbleweed goes by, that is the sound of what the villain of what we're going to be talking about in this episode, which is that of Master Rider Decade.
Decade, attack rise. I don't know how I've done
Yeah.
another bonus sound effect for that one because it's the anniversary of the 10th Heisei anniversary series that we'll be talking about. So let's crack on, shall we?
Yeah.
Build up
After
to...
that bad impression, but anyway, that's
Hey, my impressions are awesome. I mean, thing is, even when you look, just to kind of jump ahead, like you look at Tsukasa, he's kind of that cool guy that everybody loves to impersonate anyway, right? I will crack to that in a bit. So the build up to Mask Rider Decade, Kamen Rider Decade, I'm going to kick this one off. For me, it was a big deal. Like, literally, this was technically the third series I had seen. But the build up to it, so I had very little build up to it because I had seen Deno and Kiba while Kiba was airing, literally right at the tail end. So I was literally bombarded with, oh, this is the 10th Heisei. It's actually made it 10 years straight, as opposed to like Showa era, which was very choppy. So I didn't get too much of a build up, but there was a lot of excitement. And, so I have to admit, I was really excited to see, all right, what's going to come up here. How about for yourself?
Yeah. So, okay. I was excited in the aspect that it's the 10th Heisei anniversary, like you said, and they were going to incorporate in some way the previous nine riders. So again, I was interested how they're going to do that. I'm going to jump in when it came in regards to the build-up. I'm going to hint at when they first revealed the suits, but we'll get into more later on when it comes to suits and everything. But just in general, when we first saw the first reveal, I didn't like the suit. The whole pink and black for me, no. I'm sorry.
Firstly, it's magenta. And I will, just to kind of, mix our 2 points. Like, I remember, like, hearing about it being an anniversary series and something about, like, previous riders and that. But I wasn't, because again, I'll sort of elaborate later as to how that kind of wound me up. But I remember hearing that they were going to incorporate previous riders, but I didn't really, in the build-up, I wasn't really particularly fussed about how. And when I saw the suit, so I did see early images of the suit. I was like, all right, it looks cool, it looks slick. Let's see how they use it, practicality-wise.
Yeah.
So how about the first few episodes of? I mean, bearing in mind this is quite a short series. How do you feel about the first few episodes, at least?
So all I remember with the first couple of episodes is just like you see the Great Heisei War, Great Rider War, whatever. You get all the Heisei riders facing Decade. Great. You see the Denliner, you see Drag Lecter, you see all the big things, going on facing one rider. And in my head, I'm like, really? And then, okay, cool. And then it then tilts to a single photographer, and then you then get this bombardment of the build up to the Great Rider War, and then oh look, just by happenstance he finds the Decade driver just on the floor through rubble, in rubble, mind you. He picks it up, and then it just miraculously just
bonds with him, I guess. Bonds with him.
Yes, basically. Yeah, and then I'm like, sure, let's go with that, sure. So, anyway, besides that, after that, then they go to the first world, which we'll get more into in depth in the stories section, but it's all right, I guess, the story section of everything. of each rider, but otherwise, the first couple of episodes you need to kind of roll with it, kind of thing. It's like you almost have to. I don't want to go as far as saying bite the bullet, but it's like, yeah, all right, let's go with it.
All right, so I'll roll with this one. So, like, even though you said you wanted to talk about the worlds, like the first world and that, when we start talking about the main story, but I'm actually going to kick off. Like, I'll say, like, first 4 episodes, like, again, like, when you talk about how you know, like, you were a bit underwhelmed by the whole premonition of all the riders and the one rider kind of rising up, I actually was like, oh, that looks quite cool. I mean, again, it was only the third series I'd ever started watching a Kamen Rider. So I was like, wow, it's really cool. But then once, you do get Tsukasa, like, rolling along and, you get this all, the thing is, like, I saw, like, this Kiba, I then think, that, one of the early worlds that they went into was Blade, and I'm just kind of like, all right, I'm not getting any of this. Like, they're clearly they've clearly really rooted it in the whole, world of Kamen Rider in general. So I actually spent several years. This is the big joke here. I spent several years then watching all the previous riders pre-Deno, because I'd already seen Deno and Kiba. So it
Right.
took me several years to cover Kabuto Tokuga. I then went back to Decade several years later, just to find that they were. I mean, I was able to then understand Decade better. But
Mm.
the fact that, I mean, again, it was a case of, they used this whole alternative rider worlds of each series. So they weren't using the authentic actors. They were these alternative world actors. And I'm just like, I've
Right.
spent years watching this. I then re-went to the first 4 episodes, seeing, like, because I think, again, it was either Blade or someone else, like, where they were, like, in the kitchen and that. I remember specifically seeing the kitchen scene in that in one of the first 4 episodes. And I'm like, oh, right, so he was a chef or something. Someone was a chef. I can't remember which one. And I'm just like, all right, I'm now underwhelmed by the fact that they were, I mean, again, because it was an ambitious project to begin with. So obviously this is their way of, like, if previous actors didn't want to appear, etc. But again, it was kind of a good attempt, but I was just then underwhelmed just by the fact of knowing, having watched all Heisei Phase 1 at that point, that, they've, I mean, it was ambitious to begin with, but this is what they're doing to commemorate, but without having to really expand their budget.
May I? Because
Go on.
in conjunction to what you're saying about the story concept, that is, that with the whole going to the other 9 worlds and whatever of the previous Heisei riders, I will agree that it was underwhelming. That on one hand, it was good to see a nostalgia of the world of, say, Kiba or whoever that had that kind of nostalgic element to it. But like you rightfully said, and I also agree wholeheartedly, they barely brought any former rider actors to reprise the
It
role.
was, I mean, again, jumping a little bit. They did right at the end of the series, like they brought back Wataru Kurenai and one other actor. I can't remember who. I think it might have been.
No.
Ace.
No. I'm going to jump in and say during the story.
Oh, during the stories, you mean? During
During the whole going through the world, the only cameo, if you even count it, is the 4 Imagines from Deno's storyline. That is it. That is it.
I see what you mean. But I thought you originally meant, like, the original 9 riders, and again it was 2 at the end. Like, I think it was the penultimate episode, or it might have even been the final episode. But still, the fact that the whole series throughout was these alternative riders. I mean, it was interesting. It was funny, but it kind of, to me, I was like, what are they doing? Like, and like, the thing is, the alternative Cougar, I think they call him Joe Onadari or something. I mean, do you know who I'm talking about? The alternative Cougar for Decade.
Oh, right.
So, like, he's a massive fan favourite, but even though I wasn't exactly a fan of, I think the original was called Joe Godai or something. I really would have written the names down properly. But where they distinguished between the original Kuga and the decade version of Kuga, I mean, even in Shintoku Seiho they've done this. But in terms of the actor that they've used in Decade, I mean, he seemed like his face just seemed really round to me, and I'm just like, okay, I can see he's a nice guy, but I'm not feeling him as Kuga, if I'm genuinely honest. And even if I'm not even a big fan of Kuga either, like, anyway, carry on.
No, I was going to say, like, rightly said, when it came to and I guess we're tilting into casts here.
Yeah, I guess we are.
But when what was I going to say? With the cast, sorry, with the actor that played Kuga, I'm sure he's a good actor, right? But when it comes to him trying to be Kuga, something felt off. Now,
that's exactly how I felt.
So, and I haven't seen Kuga, so I don't know the lore. I don't know the resemblance, not resemblance, but
he definitely does. In my opinion, he doesn't resemble him at all. But go on.
Right, but what I felt is basically in comparison to Wizard, he was the fan student to Wizard.
You mean that the guy who did Fire?
No, the kid that the sidekick, the guy that was always wearing in green.
Gremlin.
The guy that wanted to be his pupil.
Yeah, he would go pui 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 like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one. That's basically the kind of thing I get. That he's basically just there to wear a suit. That is it.
I would actually agree with that. I mean, when it comes to the original, just to touch on the original Kuga, I mean, he was again, bearing in mind Kuga was the whole boom, we're back. He was a very sort of subtle rider, and even though, our decade version of Kuga was also subtle, whereas the original Kuga had like a very dark vibe about his acting, bearing in mind the actor didn't want to be there in the first place, but the decade actor did want to be there. So he just kind of felt a little bit chirpy compared to the original Kuga, and that's just my opinion. So going on with the rest of the cast, I'm going to start with the female lead, Natsume. I actually did like her. I mean, she was quite peppy throughout the series, and fan service 100%. I've got to give her that. How about you?
She's not the worst. She's not the worst that we've seen in the Rider series.
In my opinion. No, I mean, this is it. I can't believe you're saying that, but like, I would say, like, I actually did like her, just in general. So to say she's not the worst means that she's near the bottom, in your opinion, right?
When we get to the Rider suits, she goes down levels for me. That's why.
Okay, so the rest of the cast, what did you think? I mean, again, story, not so much story-wise, but cast-wise, what did you think of the end?
Right. I'll get to... Right. Tsukasa, I love. Full stop. The actor that plays this version of Kuga, I'm sorry, Forgetful. Natsume, I didn't mind Natsume's grandfather, who was the store owner of the photography shop. He wasn't bad. Narutaki, he was good.
Narutaki, everyone loves. I actually do like him. That's probably one of the few characters I did.
The end, Kaito Daiki, I love the dynamic between him and Tsukasa. I love it. And then, as just throwing in there for cast, again, the 4 original Imagines and their voice actors, always love that.
I mean, the 4 Imagines will constantly keep appearing, even in Neo Heisei. So, like, when it came to the Grandad store owner, he didn't really leave a mark or impression on me, to be fair. When it comes to villain guy, you literally said his name a minute ago. Villain guy, Honori Dekedo. Damn it, right. He, like him, again, everyone loved him. When it came to...
Narutaki.
Yeah, Narutaki, that's it. When it came to Daiki, though, I would say he has like a very consistent acting role, and even when he's reprised his role numerous times, he's been in Geo, for example, he's very consistent. When it comes to Tsukasa, though, this is where it gets interesting for me. Because, like, we're talking about the series Decade 1 to 30, right? I would say I was very underwhelmed by Tsukasa. I was like, okay, he's just like, meh, I'm destroyer world, I'm just passing through. It kind of felt a bit humdrum to me. But the ironic thing about the way his role was after the series, he like especially during the like the superhero Tyson, which we'll be talking about the movies at the end. He really somehow out of nowhere picked up his game. When he starred in Garo as Jinga, he really brought it. And then when he came back to Geo, his character. So in the series of Decade itself, I was underwhelmed by Tsukasa, but everything post series, he just kind of really brings it out, in my opinion, after the series.
So you feel it's a very long evolution, if you will, of the character.
Definitely. I mean, again, I'd probably say, again, superhero Tyson was where I was like, wow, he's got a bit of sass. I mean, maybe I stopped paying attention right at the end, but yeah, I'd probably say maybe at a stretch, the last few episodes he did pick up. So like, he was like fully immersed in his role as the actor. Inoue Mashiro, I think. Yeah, now I'm going from memory here. Inoue Mashiro, it must have warmed him up because unlike a lot of the actors, especially like the Cougar actor the original Cougar actor, a lot of them came to Kamen Rider New, whereas Inoue Mashiro was he was a versed actor. He was with an agency. He had like a lot of acting experience, etc. But yet he still came to Decade, and I wasn't impressed by his acting until maybe at the end or superhero Tyson.
But I mean, on regards to the casting, though, I mean, I'm sure they were going for a alternate version of that particular story world rider, such as, and I'm not including Deno for a minute, but like say you have Kiva's world where they have a young version of the rider. Say same with Hibiki, you've got a young kid. You've got who else? For flip's sake, I don't even remember.
Well,
look at me.
The kind of carpet blanketing it myself. I'll say when it comes to the alternative nine riders. I mean, even when it comes to Cougars, again, I personally wasn't feeling him. When it comes to the other eight, I would say admittedly, I didn't really give him a chance because I was like, oh, these are alternative riders. There might have been one or two. I'm thinking Fires off the top of my head. I think it was either Kabuto or Hibiki, where it was like, you had guys dressed in suits and that. So it kind of gave it a bit of a sass to it. But again, just the carpet blanket, I was just generally unimpressed. But when it comes to sort of really merging into the villains, I'll say like the way they covered the whole villain storylines. Because again, apart from Narutaki, it's mainly Decade fighting villains in the previous 9 worlds, which I did think had some credit to it. But again, there's no originality to it because that's exactly what they're doing, right?
Can I intervene?
Go on.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong here. You had in Decade, you had correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know whether if it's the OG actor that played G3X, but he then afterwards inherits the Kabuto rider belt. But
G3X was from Agito.
Sorry, that's my apologies. Yes, you're right. But I can't remember who was it. Gatak then that inherits it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's correct.
Right, and that's the actual actor, if I'm not mistaken.
If I remember correctly, you're correct. If I remember correctly, you're correct. But yeah, go on.
So at least they got someone. But again, to my point, they had no main rider reprisal roles.
Until the end. But yeah, sure. So
but either way.
Okay, so going into I'll edit this little bit out. Right, so let's talk about the story and plot. Let's talk about right. 3, 2, 1. Let's talk about the story and plot of Kamen Rider Decade. What?
Okay. Story started for me, if I might lead. It just started off with a bit of You think you know what you're going in for. That okay, he's the destroyer of worlds. It's a story of how Kadoya Tsukasa becomes the destroyer of worlds and whatever, and he goes through world to world to world, and to try and conceptually, it sounded simple. He saves the world. To then what he's been doing is he saves the world to destroy the world. And in a way, to use a Marvel comparison, it's basically Crisis on Infinite, well, Crisis of Infinite Earth, basically.
I'll
That
be honest. I've heard
everything,
of Crisis of Infinite Earths, but I don't know what it's about. But don't worry about explaining Marvel to me right now. I will say, yeah, just to interject, I will say that for me, it was fairly long-winded. And again, I wanted to see how this whole "how does he become destroyer of worlds" thing comes about. But then it became a bit, for me personally, it became a bit cliche at the end that, oh, he was just doing it for the benefit of merging dimensions or whatnot. But then again, it comes down to superhero Tyson, where again, I won't spoil it right now, that it is revealed after the series what that was all about, which then kind of brings it back to making more sense for me personally. But the series
right.
just felt, again, it felt like, oh, they've got this big premonition in episode 1 and they kind of pepper it throughout,
Yeah.
but just for an anti-climax, and that's just my opinion.
I mean, conceptually, you think it sounds simple, but like you rightly said, it is. You wonder where's it going, kind of thing, because it's like you have
Totally.
the story at the beginning, and then it's they almost ignore it to try to throw Easter eggs to previous riders, which then they underwhelm you wholeheartedly.
I agree with that. So going on to how the suits are and the power-ups.
Right. Now
All
we're
right,
talking.
now I'm gonna kick off by saying
Yes.
I like the style. I mean, the whole magenta thing didn't bother me. I mean, for a lot of people, they were like Pink Rider. It kind of bothered people, but for me, I actually like the look. And then the way they incorporated that look into DN's look, but just swapping it for blue. I love the I like them both. I mean, again, I'm not a hot fan of Decade anyway, but the suits were on point, and that's my opinion.
Right. I'm gonna go with the viewers side of things when it comes to the build-up. That I was not a fan of the whole Decade's base form, the whole magenta pink rider
Mm,
look, and that I was not. It took me a while to grow into it, but over time you then subconsciously think, okay, it's Decade kind of thing. On a flip side, when you see Deanne for the first time, love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love
totally.
it. Right. Now, I'm going to throw one more rider in there that they introduced that I did not like, and it's also the main reason why it drops the main actress down a few notches. Kivara. Master, Master of the Kivara for me, as much as the suit looked okay, no.
I only like the curves on the suit. Otherwise, like I could see why it's a bit yucky, and the whole sort of Kivara bat thing did kind of throw me off. But
Yeah.
even though your estimation of the heroine went down, but you got to admit, I got to admit, I did love her tutu though. Is that just me then?
No. Just no. Like, I'm sorry. It in a way the suit was okay, but that's it. But
I mean, because
again,
even the Kivara's suit also had like a little skirt on it, didn't it?
okay, I'll give you an example of how you do a good female villain rider well. Poppy.
Oh no 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 no! We are saving up for X8, and we've discussed this behind the scenes already. But no, I've got to, right. That's just a no. Firstly,
No,
uh,
in my opinion, okay, that's another story for another
again,
episode.
that
But
is for the Xade review. But still,
we have our differences on Kivara. Fine, we get that.
no.
But
I
at
mean,
the end
the
of the
Kavara,
day,
I mean the Kavara suit. Again, it's like I can see why it's a bit yuck. Um, but yeah, but again, I only like the curves on the suit. But again, but Natsume's kind of civilian wear. Again, it was kind of a bit of a weird tutu going on. Again, fan service 101, without a doubt.
fine, I'll go with that. Right. Anyway,
What about the power up for our man Decade?
okay. With that, it's interesting that excuse me. It's interesting how they don't have like any other series of riders that they'd have power-ups as they go along before their final forms or whatever. In the circumstance of Decade, he uses the final sorry, for finishing, he uses the powers of previous riders.
Like he goes through all the cards, doesn't he?
Yeah. What?
Yeah, carry.
No. No, I was going to say those are just finishers, but what I meant was say, what's a good example? Say you turn Kuga into an oversized beetle, for instance, or you turn Deno into Momotaros for some unknown reason. But yeah, sure, let's go with it. You turn, what other thing? You turn Kiba into an oversized bow and arrow, and I'm like in my head, okay, sure. But then you have nothing in regards to, like regular power-ups, should we call it, or just progressional power-ups. Nothing. And
Because again, I think
hang on,
that's
hang on,
kind of
hang on.
how my.
No, sorry, I was going to say, they were pushing merch on cards here. They were really pushing merch on cards.
Of
like,
course,
there
they
was
still are.
nothing.
Yeah, like it's been going on since the beginning of Decade. The whole Ganbarizing, dice.
Yes.
That's the thing. But I also
Right.
like to kind of cover your point about the whole power ups thing. Like you didn't really get it. Like, if anything, that's probably a more Neo Heisei thing that they kind of do that whole gradual thing. And people,
No.
some people
No, I
feel that it's a
disagree.
bit too
No.
much. But for me,
No.
like, like it's fine, like how they had all these cards. But I'm talking about
Right.
the power up suit where he had like all the cards going across his chest, which
That's his final form.
I felt was
That's his
ugly. Yeah, the final
form.
form. Yeah, so that's the final form I'm talking about. So the final,
And I like that.
I didn't. I thought it was a bit yuck.
Right, let me finish that because I like his final form ride, right? I like that. I actually don't mind it. I think it's subtle.
No,
it's
it
not
ain't. No, it ain't. That's just
Right.
straight up disagreement.
No, hang on.
It's not subtle in the slightest. It's cards.
Wait.
Yes.
Wait. But, right, in the flip side, though, Diane's final form looks ugly. I'm sorry, I don't like that.
You're gonna
Anyway.
remind me of his final form.
Right. But another thing. When it comes to...
describe to me what his final form looked like.
It's basically Decays, but with 2 rows.
Oh, I think I remember. Okay.
It was in the DVD special.
Again, it's been so long since I've actually seen it.
Whatever. But anyway, so yeah. Anyway, I like, and I'll leave it at this, that I like Decade's final form ride. In regards to, and I will contest this. You mentioned that it's more for Neo Heisei that they will push the progressional power-ups thing before that's it. Right. Agito had various forms, I might add. Deno had a few forms, I might add. Sword form, rod form, axe form, I will say that. Kiba had multiple forms, I will say that.
Right, so just to kind of get into it, like what?
Right, do you want me to carry on?
Hold on. Like when you're talking about Deno and Cuba, for example, those I wouldn't call those like powering up. I would say like so even when you're distinguishing like sword, rod, axe, gun, and when you're distinguishing like Cuba, Bassa, and the purple one from Cuba, those to me are like alternative. They're not like powering up. But what I meant was like, say we take 0-1, you've got, Rising Hopper, Shining Hopper, Metal Cluster Hopper. That's the progression, and then we're going to get spoiler alert, 0-2. But, that's what I would say is what's pushed a lot more in Neo Heisei, like, starting after Decade. So, like, I mean, again, not so much double, but maybe, it's like even Forze, again, you had, like, electric and fire, so it's kind of like building up a little bit.
No. With that, no, I think those are forms. I think with Force, those are forms.
Okay, I mean, it's a very complicated one, but for me, it was like the decade. I can't even remember the name of it. You had Decade, and then the Decade with the cards across his chest. That's
Final Form Ride.
Final Form Ride. There you go. So for me, it was like Decade, Final Form Ride, Decade. That was literally it for me, which I think is simple and fine. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that personally, but I just didn't like the look of Final Form Ride.
I actually didn't mind how it looked, that's all.
So let's try to talk a little bit about devices. Now, for me, I can't really say I remember the bikes. I mean, I think I remember seeing the End's bike more than Decade's bike, like being a really wide bike, I think. But to talk about just general devices, I only really remember them because I've got the Shinchoku Seiho of it, where he's got like the sword, he's got like the long sword with the book, and then the book also becomes a gun, which it's kind of slick. And I do vaguely remember, like only looking at the Shinchoku Seiho, that he did kind of walk around with like a little booklet thing, which I think was quite slick. But again, it wasn't prominent to the story anyway.
So, for me, let me start with the device, the Decade driver itself. It's slick. It's small. It's small. It's simple. Let's put it that way. It's a nice card reader, if you will. I like it personally. The DN driver, which doubles up as DN's gun, I like it. I think it's cool. With the along with devices, the whole card-holding book that turns into a gun and a sword. And I'm like, as I mentioned to you off stage, I'm like in my head, sure, why not, kind of thing. But in regards to artillery, as in between the two, guns and whatever, I'm sorry, but the end wins just simply with an oversized magnum-like thing, and I love that thing. The end.
A lot of fans do, to be fair, and I forgot to talk about that. I'll talk about it in a minute. Go
on. The bike, which is that of like a very almost prominent magenta and white with hints of black of I don't want to say it's like a Harley, but
wide. I remember it being wide. That's literally all.
Yeah, like a stretch bike, if you want to call it that. And I'm sure I'm butchering bike fans here, but like it was all right. I
don't know, because you're saying, I mean, because I remember it wide, but you're comparing it to a Harley. If I'm not mistaken, Kiva's bike was, resembled a Harley. If I remember correctly, both Decade and DN's bikes were more resemblant of like a police bike. No.
See, I don't remember DN's bike.
I think they were quite similar, but I think DN's was like quite chunky.
See, Decade's bike is chunky. If we're going there...
Yeah. Alright, so even if you want to look at just Decades, I'm pretty sure it was. But it wasn't Harley style, because again, Kiva's was. And then Deno, like just to jump back to, Deno's was like a stunt bike, but that was in the train, which again, was kind of their way of shortcutting that one, but it's cool.
No, but then that's like saying Double's bike was like a sports bike, like a Kawasaki kind of thing.
It was, yeah.
Still love that bike, Double.
I mean, just to cover this little bit, before going on to the next topic, I mean, I forgot to talk about Dien's gun, which is a massive fan favorite, and yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I've got no special opinion on it, but I did like it, and of course the driver, which I'm glad you remembered because I didn't. But yes, the decade driver is very poignant. It stands out. Everyone knows it. It's very simple. It's very sleek. It kind
And
of does the job. It twists. It's not like I mean, even if you want to crit Neo Heisei for its over elaborate drives, this one kind of had a little bit of that sort of twisty thing going on, but it wasn't so in your face. It's so subtle and sleek,
yeah.
but it became focal. That's the cool thing about it. And then even just to jump to Geo, the fact that they just recolored it just made it even better, in my opinion.
So if I might, I was going to add, when they did the final form ride for a decade, how he had his oh, I cannot remember the device he had, almost like the decade cellular kind of thing. It was almost like a
I'm just
tablet he had.
I'm now thinking about my Shinchoku Seiho. I'm like, I think I know what you're talking about, but yeah, go on.
So what they do with that, which is rather clever, is he opens the driver, he yanks out the actual core of the driver. He then like taps in all the previous 9 riders, then hits decay, slaps this device, almost like a tablet device, onto
Oh
the
yeah,
belt.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
I like that concept because you move that core of the decay driver onto the side, and then even whether it works or not in real life, I doubt it does. But to use your finisher, you just slap the side, which is pretty okay. But then you still have the tablet here, so it's almost having a new belt, new driver in a way, which I like.
yeah, I vaguely remember it now, but yeah, you're totally on that one.
I mean, granted, it's not building on top of a driver, but it's still utilizing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So in a way, how can I word this? Unlike, say, who's it? Xaid,
Mhm.
for instance, like when you have one and then you build one on top of the other, for instance, kind of thing, um, where it gets bombastic, but then that series in on itself is bombastic, but then we'll get that when we get to that. This I felt was very simplistic, driver wise. I like it personally.
Yeah, I totally will agree. I mean, again, it's something that you've reminded me of, and yeah, I do remember it looking quite nice. I like the sort of two tone that they went with. But I'll say that, sort of going on to episodes that stood out, like, those kind of Final Form Ride episodes kind of vaguely did, but again, I didn't like the suit's look, so it kind of became a bit of a backtrack. But for me, like, even introducing the end was probably, bearing in mind this is quite a short series, I'll say introducing the end was probably, like the whole treasure hunting thing was those were personally the episodes that stood out for me because everything else was just hopping worlds and the end was just like there. And then again, for me, it was Superhero Tyson that stood out for me more than anything.
Just in regards to the end, and whilst we tie into memorable moments, like you said, and I will agree that Kaito Daiki is not just the scene stealer for when he is the show stealer, basically. And I will agree to that. But on top of that, and I'll add one more on top, and I'll ask you a question here in regards to Kaito Daiki. How many gun henshin devices have we seen in not just Riders, but in Super Sentai? And
Oh,
I
trust
can't,
you, right? So wait,
because I can
so
only
what's
I
your question about the gun? What is it about? What?
just a gun henshin.
Just the gun henshin? Let me think. Well,
I can only think of
off
one
the top of
more.
my head, on the top of my head, we're looking at Kyoryuja.
Yes.
Off the top of my head, Kyoryuja.
Oh, I got one more.
Go on.
Um, Lupin Ranger versus Pat Ranger.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's it.
right. I mean, I'll probably edit this bit out, but just to really think about it. Right. So Kug was belt, Agito was belt, Ryuki was carded belt, Blade was no, yeah, carded belt. I mean, because Fires had Fire's phone, but it was still primarily a, but it wasn't a gun. Then even when you had gun, I mean, I've jumped ahead. Gun from. Right. So. Okay. But then post decade, yeah, Ding, maybe USB, Ring. Right.
There isn't.
And again, like Super Sentai. I mean, again, I'm probably going to edit this bit out. Like,
But I mean,
on
I'm
top of
sure
my
I
head
am
was Ryu
wrong.
Soldier. On top of my head was Ryu Soldier.
Yeah, and
The thing
Little
is,
Ranger
like,
was a
there's so many
Kamen.
in Sentai. There's so much going on in Sentai. That's like really ridiculous. I mean,
And I'm happy to be proven wrong, right? If there's any more in Riders, by all means. But in Rider wise, Daiki is the only one, as far as I know, that has a gun henshin device, which adds that level of uniqueness to him.
fact is, there's so many riders that I know of and I've seen them all, and I'm probably just overwhelmed by it. I can't even think. So I'll happily go with that. Anything else that stood out for you?
Um, in regards to what stood out for me and slash memorable, when it came to the final form ride, right? Granted, I know you don't like that form, but what I do love is how, in conjunction to when and Decade does his final finish, he calls upon one of the previous riders, whatever, to do the attack with him. But it's not just the rider; it's in their final form, which I love.
I mean, obviously, in recent years, they kind of make that a common thing, but for Decade at that time, it was special. I do remember that much at least.
It was good. What was also, I guess, memorable or unavoidable is the whole gimmickry where during the when they visit the other nine worlds or whatever, then they convert whatever thing into another. The riders say Kiba again into an oversized bow and arrow, or Kugo into a big beetle or whatever, or Dano into his actual imagined form or whatever. And I just thought, why? But anyway, one I will say, and you have forgotten this.
Okay.
They went, and one thing I remember, they went to a world without riders, and I'll give you that's a clue. Do you know what I mean by that?
Oh, my mind's blank. You're gonna have to tell me.
They went to the world of Shinkenja.
Oh, of course, the crossover, right? Yeah,
That was unique.
yeah.
I
Well, it
have
was
to
no.
admit,
It was the first. It was the first. It wasn't just unique. It was the first. And no, I remember because I was, I was actively watching Shinkenja anyway. So seeing that was cool on both sides, watching Sentai and watching Rider. So that was definitely cool. And like, when it comes to like the way they did that, I mean, again, it was so unique. But kind of leaking into the next topic, like the way they kind of made Kamen Rider jump worlds, like through the nine worlds. It was good seeing like all these different scenes and all these different environments that were from the previous nine. Especially where
mm,
I actually caught up by watching all previous nine. But I'll also say that things like the photography studio was kind of it wasn't that cliche cafe, but it kind of had that vibe, so that was cool. But the most prominent setting that they used is like the one they used in the Premonition and the Rider War, which in real life it's a place in Japan called Mount Iwafune Yama. And I went and saw that. I went there this time last year. I was there, and it was actually quite an amazing scene to go visit. But that just using that prominently, like where they're having the rider wars, where they're riding around. I mean, they must have had a hell of a lot of fun like
mm.
filming that on location. So that's my opinion of the locations in Carmen Rider Decade.
I mean, for me, location-wise, and again, would be besides the main CAF or
Photography studio.
photography. Yeah, exactly that. Besides those, there were some Easter egg locations in regard with the Nine Worlds, like say when they brought up Smart Brain, where they brought up
I remember.
uh, yeah, when they brought up Kiba's old home, but it was very, very dusted up, for instance. Oh, another thing I do remember and I love is how Tsukasa, he during Kabuto's world, he did the whole gimmickry of
My grandmother
my
told me
grandma
this.
wants to, yeah, that thing. I love that. But otherwise, it's a very how can I word this? There's no it, there's no real Easter egg. It's more gimmickry. Like again, I just remembered what the Hibiki's form was when he did when Decay did Hibiki's
Wasn't it
finish,
like
and
a
that was
massive disc thing, like the drum pad thing?
yes, that's
Mm.
it. He just turns into an oversized drum, and then you just slap it. That's it.
Well,
And I
I
was in
think
my
no.
head,
I like the way that, in some regard, the final rides, like using the attack ride thing, sometimes was a case of mugging off the rider that it was supposed to be paying homage to. I mean, like I think Blades was like like he turned into a massive sword. Like he just like I'm gonna
yes,
throw you now. Boom, you're a sword.
yes.
Great, it's
It's,
insane
Blade becomes an oversized version of
of his
his weapon.
blades.
That's it. And I'm like, why? Why would you do that?
I
You're
think
meant to
again, I think
pay
it's just I
homage.
mean again because there's a lot of things that are quirky about the series as well, and like just to kind of brush the location thing. Like I did like how they'd just pull the photography thing down, and that'd be the next one
Yeah,
that they were going into.
yeah,
It was quite a
yeah,
quirky series, even if I was a bit underwhelmed by the series. But just
yeah.
post series where it picks up, and this is where we are going to be talking about movies. So like the locations of the movies was cool. I mean, I did love the whole Dai Shocker setting, and like even in the movie, like I've kind of jumped ahead in the movies because you had like the warship movie, which I'll be honest, I don't really remember too much about, but I do remember the movies post series, which were great, and I've literally just carpet bombed that again.
Right. So, me personally, when it comes to movies, I honestly don't remember anything unfortunate about it. That's my great knowledge of Decade's movie standpoint.
Right, my thing just went beep, so I might have to. If you can repeat that, just repeat it, just because yeah, just if you can repeat that, just repeat that.
No, just I mean, in regards to my knowledge and memorableness of Decade's movies, is like I don't remember it at all. I mean, besides knowing what Diane's final form looks like, besides an utter
I mean, I
atrocity,
think
but
if I remember correctly as well, I even though those pre-Ender series, I'm pretty sure there was like something with an alternative Deno that then became its own spin-off movie series, like Red, Blue, and Yellow.
isn't that the hyper climax?
Trying to think, it was like an alternative Deno that they introduced in Decade.
Oh no, I know who you mean. That's the
Was
grandson
it
of
Cho? Was it
Deno.
Cho Deno?
Yes, yes, it is.
I mean,
They made a movie.
I no,
I
they made
remember.
three. They made. I mean, there was one during the course of Decade, and
Yeah,
they made Red, Blue, and Yellow sometime afterwards. And I remember, like I mean, if I'm honest, when they started doing this, it made me hella confused. And then
yes.
watching Red, Blue, and Yellow, it just kind of felt like extended episodes, if I'm genuinely honest.
Honestly, I don't even remember if I've seen Red Balloon and Yellow. Honestly, but anyway, other than that, see that I mean that shows how when it comes to series that it was so. I mean, I don't even know if the even series knew where they wanted to go. To be honest, that it kind of goes to show that how I remember the movies. To be honest.
Do you remember the music for the whole Kamen Rider Decade series?
Right. Yes. Right. May I? May I? Thanks. So, Gact doing the opening, Journey Through the Decade.
On the road, yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I would just watch the series to watch the opening. I have seen there is two versions of the video, the Vivo video of Journey Through the Decade. There's one version of Gact as the main focal point, and there's another with Decade as the main focal point.
Yes, I've got the DVD CD, yeah.
And regardless, I love either or version. I love the music, and I love how Gact somehow came into the fray of
I mean, for me, like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of just it literally has just reminded me just now that I was actually in Japan of the year of Decade. And, I did buy that DVD CD. And I will be genuinely honest, I'm pretty sure I hadn't heard of Gact before Decade, but then, I started hearing him everywhere in, like, little bits of other Japanese media. But then the one thing I kind of found more recently, just somehow, like where I'm working on my RyuKiva channel, I actually then saw that he did the theme Journey Through the Decade. He did the theme for Kamen Rider Decade in the 10th year of his own career. So I thought that was quite cool. And, getting into Gact, like I wouldn't say I'm a massive fan, but I do like his music. But just to kind of offshoot from Kamen Rider, I love Gact in the fact that he then ended up going into another tokusatsu series called Bima Satria Garuda, and his character in that is amazing. And so the fact that this guy, he talks about his love for Kamen Rider, it really does show. And then his love for tokusatsu when he does Bima Satria Garuda, it just shines, literally.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he also do a Gundam orientated
he did a lot. He's done a lot of anime stuff in general. I can't say I'm too hot on the knowledge, but
because there's a video of him in what looks like a Gundam mech, and the music's called Redemption.
That sounds familiar, but I won't claim to know.
Right, but nevertheless, and also with the whole title of Journey Through the Decade, it also ties in well with what Tsukasa says as Decade, that I'm just a passing through Kamen Rider. And again, I love that suave he has. But
suave of who?
Of Tsukasa and Decade.
Okay, so like talking about the suave of him, how did you feel about his general fight scenes in Decade series?
Right, I have two folds on that, and the reason I say two folds is the regular fights is just generic.
I'll agree.
Right, the finishers, when he does his rider kicks and it goes through the cards, when he shoots through the cards and whatever, they're okay. Now,
a bit generic too, but still cool. Yeah. Go on.
When he does his finishes with other riders in base form, I don't like it. But when he does his finishes in his finer form with the finer form riders, I love that. That, to me, is an awesome nod to the previous riders, in my opinion.
I mean, I agree with you all, apart from just repeating what I said earlier, that, I thought it was quite quirky and funny that, when he does use the rider cards, when he uses the actual riders to become a weapon or something, it's kind of like mugging them off in a very sort of quirky fashion, and I thought it was quite amusing. But apart from that, I have nothing to really add to what you've said, but I do agree that it was generic. There was nothing standout-ish at all.
No, but here's the flip side, though. When it comes to what Decade can do is gain kind of abilities in a way from the other riders, whereas with the end, he actually summons sub riders.
Yep, I remember.
Which I love, that you see two different sub riders that you never imagined to see together.
Cool. Yeah,
Like
I remember.
like one memorable one for me is Ixa and Saiga.
Ah.
And I'm like in my head, nice. I like the intimidationness of these two, but as like and still. So it's like I like that. You know, I like that. Like you get all of those nods and whatever, which I love. But the generic side of things for Decade is such a letdown, unfortunately. But there's no real balance. There's one that's a heavy detriment, and the other one is a nice Easter egg. It's just that.
Well, I think when it comes to that sort of Easter eggs, I think as Neo Heisei progressed, they kind of not only did it a little better, but they then ended up doing it too much anyway. That's just my opinion.
How do you mean by that?
Again, like, yeah, because when, especially maybe Gaim onwards, it just became this thing about legend riders. And again,
Oh yes.
so yeah, that's just covering that in a nutshell. How did you feel about the ending and climax of Decade?
Forgetful.
I'll agree, like, it was very underwhelming, but then everything epilogue-wise, like, again, Superhero Tyson said, even his, like, reappearance in Geo, it just becomes, the series itself was just underwhelming. They could have done so much better. But, I mean, I've heard a few reasons as to why they only recorded, I think they technically only recorded 29 episodes, and then somehow managed to stretch material to be 30 or 31, right? But again, series wise, yeah, very underwhelming. So just to finish
Agreed.
off, would you recommend Kamen Rider Decade to a friend?
You lead. Because I need to think of it. You lead.
Right, just give me 1 second, right. Right. Okay, right. So I will say that I would not really recommend it. Just in a flat out no. I mean, even whether you've watched all previous 9 and then it's like I wouldn't recommend it to a certain type of fan. I mean, it's very mediocre, like in general. Like if you're, it's kind of what one of the phrases you've used before. Like if you're a completionist, I'd say all right, well go watch it then. But I can't say I'd recommend it to a type of person or a type of rider fan, and certainly not as a first rider.
Right. I'm gonna go with what you said, but I'm gonna one up that.
Okay. I mean,
with a comparison.
Really like Decade. Bearing in mind you really like Decade, I'll be surprised if go on.
Bearing in mind, I saw Decade first. If I hadn't seen Gokaiger, I might recommend it to completionists. But after seeing how a Super Sentai can get actual cameos,
Gokaiger's superior in my opinion.
The what?
Gokaiger's superior in my opinion as well. So.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. This is how you honor an anniversary. And even then, it wasn't like a 30 or 40. It was just 35, but they did it amazingly. Gokaiger, that is. And that's how you do it. So, with that in mind, how Decade couldn't do what a Super Sentai could do.
Bearing in mind, Gokaiger was so many years later, so I guess they must have learned, in my opinion.
Yeah, what not to do, evidently. So, to sum it, if you're a completionist, have alcohol on the side.
Nice.
On its own.
You're the one that likes Decade, though, right?
I do, but once I talk to it, once I rethink, It's like saying if you go back to a movie, you then rethink whether you still like it or not, kind of thing.
Okay.
It's like this. I'm basically revisiting a series, and after word vomiting to you, whether I like it or not, it's very conflictious
No,
because
see, I
at the
mean,
time,
like, I can be nostalgic about it. Like, I can be nostalgic about Decade. I can still admit that I didn't like it. I will then also say I preferred Decade post series. So again, Superhero Tyson onward
yeah,
makes me like Decade, but the series itself, meh.
yes, I mean, as a whole, the series is forgetful. As a whole, if you want to call this series an anniversary, it's shameful. If you want to call this series an Easter egg, to a degree, in some specs, there are little speckles of Easter egg, great. But if anything, it is merely just a marketing push for the Gambarai series. I mean, there is no toy gimmickry. It is just
Cars.
focusing on the exactly. That is it. There is barely any gimmickry whatever. Granted, it launched and skyrocketed
The
Kaito
series.
Daiki, and
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, again,
but
Inoue Masuro's profile went right up, even though he wasn't active before. So yeah, 100%.
you know, like granted, the chemistry between Tsukasa and Daiki is great, and I'm not going to deny that. But that is it. There is little bit of good, but the plot is boring. It is so forgetful. You can barely remember anything. There is barely any forms but the final form for the suits to even remember. The villains, what villains? There's only one. You know, there's barely any character, whatever, and it's just so. Whereas compared to say something, and again, I'm going to use Gokaiger as an example because that is a anniversary how it should be done, where each episode, or two, is involving a former series, but slyly, not in the face with a brick.
Well, face of the brick, thank you guys for watching our review of Kamen Rider Decade. You can catch us all on social media as per Toku Bros at Facebook and Instagram and this very YouTube channel. Twitter at Toku Bros 71. And then myself, the lovely RyuKiva at RyuKiva Toku. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. You can pledge to me on Patreon. And my fan sub word blog at ryukivatoku.wordpress.com.
And you can catch me on Facebook and Instagram at the Winter Cosplayer. And as always, do catch us next time. And as always, until next time, fist through the can.
Through the can. See you next time.